And then so the guy's all up in my face, right? And then I say to him like, man, if I could issue a pin over your face for being ugly, I would. Hello. Hi, hey everybody. Welcome to our October webinar. For those that don't know me, my name is Luke. I'm one of your OHS organizers here. Tonight we're talking about the risk of diesel exhaust. We've got a special guest along, Jen Hines, who is an occupational hygienist, and she'll be joining us in a bit to go through some of the very technical aspects of it. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that at least I am broadcasting from. You may be in a different area, but I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to their ancestors and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I also extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who might be tuning in today. And I would like to state that the Wurundjeri people have never ceded this land. This land was stolen, never ceded, and it always was, always will be Aboriginal land. I'd like to thank Slater and Gordon and WorkSafe for their ongoing support of the OHS unit at Trades Hall. Without their huge amount of support, we wouldn't be able to do a lot of the work that we do. So thank you very much. And just one more thing before we get started on the subject of tonight that we're here to talk about. There's been some important legislation passed in the last couple of weeks, and Sam's going to jump in and just give us a bit of an update on that. Without further ado, Sam.
Sam's Safety Updates. Sam's Safety Updates.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for that intro. That was bloody beautiful. Hey, safety team. Big update here today, focusing on the Vic Health and Safety Act. So, we've all seen it, we all know it, we all love it. It's this guy right here. So the following 3 changes have been enacted just last week, I believe. So number 1, consultation. This is a big one. So listen up. Section 35 and 36 have moved into one section, Section 35. This means that the trouble HSRs had when trying to enforce Section 36 via a pin and having that pin knocked back via a technicality is an eradicated risk, which is awesome. Section 35 contains all the requirements of the old 35 and 36 together and is a penalty provision, which means that if consultation is not done properly, the HSR writes a pin on Section 35 and WorkSafe can't reject it on technical grounds. Whereas sometimes these pins used to get rejected because they would cite the wrong section of the Act, or the pin would cite the wrong section of the Act, which was just like a technicality, which is not a risk anymore because it's one section that you can only, there's only one section available to cite, which is awesome. So Section 36 is completely gone. Other sections of the Act don't change number. So now there's just no Section 36. So it goes straight from 35 to 37. And I'm going to pop the full new version of this in the comments below in 1 second, just after I'm done with this update. Number 2, News 2. Serving a pin by email. This is a big one too. Section 64 has been amended so that if a HSR serves a pin via email, they no longer have to seek the consent of the employer to them serving the PIN. So, when you're serving a PIN by email, you used to have to get consent to do that for it to count. You no longer need that consent. This is just the act keeping up with the times. It's such a convenient way to issue a PIN is via email. Now you can do it even more conveniently. It's the best. Third big news update, some minor but important amendments to the workers' comp system to increase some payments and to allow some payments to be made to a worker's estate where a worker has passed away have been implemented. So a big change for some there as well. So 3 massive bits of safety news there, and these are changes that are in effect from last week. So go forth and send pins via emails until your heart desires. That's the safety update. I'm going to cut back to Luke here, who's going to give you the rest of the rundown on diesel fumes. It's going to be amazing. Here you go.
Sam's Safety Updates. Sam's Safety Updates.
Okay, yes. So, like I said before, thank you for that, Sam. So we're joined tonight. By way of introduction. So we get a lot of questions from our our network that we have out there saying. People ask, is this work method safe? Or is this substance that we use at my workplace safe? Is this piece of machinery potentially unsafe? And we're always happy to answer these questions. Feel free to send us anything, send Renata anything. She's a full bottle of knowledge and she'll, be able to answer anything we've got. But the thing I've noticed is that people generally have pretty good instincts for this stuff, right? So you might not have all the information, you might not have all the facts, but just by asking that question, it shows that people are generally something in the back of their mind is ringing a bell and saying, I think this might be unsafe. I'm going to clarify. It shows that people have pretty good instincts for this stuff. So it doesn't always happen. I mean, obviously there's a couple of pretty prominent, cases of deadly things being unrecognized for a very long time. Asbestos being probably the big one that comes to mind. So it feels like, maybe it's a biological or an evolutionary thing where if something feels unsafe, it probably is. And that's, it's actually reflected in our OHS legislation as well. So rather than having just a list of rules about things that your employer and you can and can't do, the majority of instances, it comes down to appraising your workplace and managing the risks that you can identify. So the reason I'm saying all of this is, unlike, in previous weeks, we were discussing silica, it had a big focus for us. There's no strict Australian standard for diesel fumes in the workplace, right? So there's nothing for you to put under your boss's nose and say, this is what the legislation says about this issue. What we do have is a set of laws that are better than that, to be honest. It's your employer has an all-encompassing responsibility to provide a safe working environment for you and all of your colleagues. And if a failure to do that essentially puts them in breach of the Act. And in the instance of diesel, which we're going to be talking about today, that's it's just that it's present is the fact that it is enough of a reason to look at it and manage it just by its presence. So let's start off. Like I said, we're delighted to be joined by Jen Hines. Jen is she's an occupational hygienist. And she is with a wealth of experience in the area. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you very much for having me here along tonight. It's great.
Cool. So do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about how you came to be interested in the area, or, why it came up as something that you felt, workers and employers really needed to be aware of?
Yeah, sure. I became interested in diesel exhaust about 15 years ago. I worked a lot in underground coal mines, and that's one area where diesel exhaust is very prolific. Anywhere where there's, confined areas and you've got diesel machinery, then that's somewhere, to be of concern. So I got interested in it then, trying to reduce exposure to the workers within those coal mines. And from there, I've been doing a whole lot of more work and currently doing my PhD in emissions-based maintenance of diesel engines, which is really, to put it a bit more simply, is proactive maintenance of engines so that you're reducing the exposure to the workers. So I'm currently well into that.
Yeah, great. And this is why it's great to have you along. So yeah, I just want to remind everybody as well, the fact that we have Jen along, we encourage people to ask questions. We've got the live stream there happening where you can type your questions in the comments there. Sam and I are your friendly neighborhood organizers, but we are not by no means experts when it comes to specific issues like this. So we very much encourage you to participate, and if you have a question for Jen, please pipe up and we'll get there. Diesel, what is it?
I can hear you.
2 seconds.
You can talk in this one.
Can I?
Sorry, everyone. The sound, for some reason, isn't working when we cut to the other shot, but we're about to fix that, and it's going to be great. So add that mic. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, you're on this one, aren't you? Ah, that's why. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi.
That seems to be working.
I can hear it.
Great.
Yeah, good. On a chemical level, the difference between your daily exposure to diesel exhaust is that it's vastly different to being exposed on a regular basis and for a sustained amount of time, and it's especially without proper ventilation. That's the difference, right? So, and what is it? So, what is it, and why does it get into your lungs, and what does it do once it gets there? So, Jen has sent me these slides and these images, which I'm going to be honest with you, I don't fully understand.
Yeah, sure, I will. So when we're looking at diesel exhaust, we're not just looking at particles. We're also looking at gases as well, and that's important to remember when we come to look at some of the health effects. The picture that you've got up there on the screen is actually the particles, and when diesel exhaust is actually first made, it comes out of lots of tiny little particles, and they very soon agglomerate into a larger form or into chains or clumps, but they're still also very tiny. So they're like less than a micrometer in size. So they're very small. We can't see it with the naked eye, but this is what it's doing. So you get these chains. You've got a carbon center, and around there then you've got other chemicals attaching onto it. So it might be some of the oils, it might be some metals as well that have come through on the exhaust. All sorts of things can absorb onto that with the hydrocarbons from the unburnt fuel. So that's what you're seeing there, and it is technical and scientific, and unless you're actually looking under a microscope, you're not going to see it. But that's what's happening there. So that's the particulate side that you've got in front of you there.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, because in my research, I sort of came across the fact that there's the gas that's released from a diesel engine, which is like nitrous oxides and carbon monoxide, and then there's the sort of particulate matter as well. Basically the black stuff, the soot that comes out, right? Like, is that correct? There's the two things, and it seems the particulate matter, the DPM, diesel particulate matter, that seems to be the particularly dangerous stuff, right?
Yeah, well, I think we'll get onto it later on, but we talk about, I guess, if it's a carcinogen, so I'm going to mess you up a little bit here.
Oh, okay.
When we're talking about diesel exhaust, we're talking about all of it combined. So they, we talk about the different components as well, but when they talk about it being a carcinogen, it's actually both components together. But it appears it's more likely that it's the particulate side that's causing the problem. The gaseous side causes other issues for us as well.
Right.
Which we'll get onto.
Yes, I'm sure we will. Yeah, so that was a list that I found of the chemicals that there's quite a few chemicals there, and quite of them are known carcinogens. So the fact that we might actually just go back to what you were saying about it being a carcinogen. Do you want to maybe talk through that aspect of it?
Yep. So in 2012, it was designated a carcinogen by IARC. Before then, it had been a potential carcinogen, but it took until 2012 till they deemed that it actually was a carcinogen, and it's whole diesel exhaust that they label as the carcinogen. So it's essentially affects the lung, and there is some information relating to the bladder as well, but it's the lung that it's really attributing to, which makes sense because we're breathing it in, and because of the size of the particles, because they're so tiny. Which there was a picture of the size of it on that screen you just had there.
Oh yes,
right down into our lungs, so right down into the lower part of our lungs, and can actually go sort of.
So yeah, you can see it up there in the top right. Yeah,
so if you can see I don't know if you can everyone can see what's on the screen, but there's the long piece there is actually a hair, and the dirt particles are a sand particle next to it, and the red ones, that's at 2.5 micron. Well, the diesel particulate is 1 micron, so diesel particulate is about still more than half of those little red circles there. So comparing that to the size of the hair, it's very, very tiny. And therefore, it's got the ability to get right down deep into our lungs and cause the problems there.
Yeah, and it's it's very common. We were talking about silica last time, so it's those again very fine particles that get into the very deep deepest parts of your lungs, and that's where they can really do the damage. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And we don't know that it's happening. It's got a really long latency period. So, we can be exposed now, but it'll be somewhere between 10 and 30 years if we're exposed to enough of it over a long enough period of time before we actually see that health effect. So, I guess in that way, it can be easy for people to ignore, or, I've been exposed to this for a long time. It's not going to happen to me. So people, I guess, can become a little complacent with a lot of these things.
Yeah, and it's and that sort of lack of it does have like acute symptoms as well, though, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. So it's also very much an irritant. So it irritates the eyes and the nose, the respiratory tract. So it can cause coughing and tearing up of your eyes, lacrimation of your eyes, as well. So it's got both sides to it. But the acute obviously is just a short-term effect that will go away as the
Yeah.
exhaust dissipates.
So we've actually just had a couple of questions come through. So David Thompson, he said, as an ex-serviceman, what, if anything, can you tell me about the cancer causal effect from diesel while driving the old APCs? And what, if anything, is going to come from the current information? I'm actually not sure what an APC is. Does that ring any bells
I think
to you?
that's one of their, well, it's one of their vehicles. I'm not sure if it's one of their tanks. I've done a bit of work with Defence before.
Yep.
So I don't know what the exposure is for that. Defence has done a whole lot of work around current exposures, so they would know what sort of levels there are. That being an older vehicle, it's probably got, it's probably got further exposure because the fuel that would have been used in it would have been a lesser quality than what is used now. So we've had a whole lot of improvements over the years. So I don't know what the levels are.
Yeah, sure. So Dave's actually just added a sort of an addendum, which is that he was discharged back in 1974. So previous to that would have been when he was a serviceman.
Yep.
So some of that older technology was probably more dangerous, right?
That's right. Well, we were using a much dirtier fuel then because diesel fuel, all of the rubbish would go into the diesel fuel because it would operate our machines and it was fine. So that's not the case now. We've got a far better and cleaner product, but back in 74, it wouldn't have been a very good product and there would have been fairly high exposure, I expect.
Yeah, okay.
Or potentially.
And actually,
high exposure.
yeah, so our next questions come from Andrew, which actually just follows on quite well from that first question. He's asked how much change has occurred to the exhaust fumes with the modern engines, having a secondary burn to reduce emissions. Has that had a pretty significant effect?
Yeah, very significant effect, but it doesn't actually apply to all industries. So anything where you're what's referred to as over the road, then there's been a lot of changes that have happened. So we've had changes to the fuel itself, we've had changes to engines. So from about 2007, engines certainly for over the road are far cleaner and burn a far cleaner exhaust than what they did previously. We've got what's referred to as TEIRs in the engine, where they've had to get progressively cleaner. So both America and Europe have, I guess, forced that change on vehicle designers to actually improve the exhaust that's actually being emitted from those machines. But it's not applicable to all. So anyone that's in mining, it's not as easy a change as that. So although we can see lots of great change, it's not applicable everywhere, or it isn't, I guess, as well forward that it is in all of the industries.
Yeah, sure. So these changes are not as widely distributed across the entire workforce. It's some sectors have faced some improvements and some not.
That's right. But most surface operations, anything that's above ground, it should be okay, because we've had to do it certainly not just for health effects. A lot of the environmental effects have really brought the change as well.
Okay, right. Yes, because I mean, the environmental lobby and because obviously it's not just human lungs that suffer from diesel fumes, is it? It's the environment. So
yeah, and that's why I've seen massive reduction in the amount of sulfur that's in the fuel that's allowed to be sold over the road as well. So we've seen big reductions there as well, and that's all really based around environmental.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. I mean, it would be nice to have workers' interests being represented in that change as well. I mean, it's obviously good for all of us, but I love the planet. So we've actually just had one more question, which will just sort of tie up this section nicely. What sort of lung diseases are associated? So you mentioned lung cancer as the substance being a carcinogen. Is there anything else? I read that there was asthma it can result from diesel exhaust, lung disease, heart disease, neurological immune diseases.
Yeah, so they're all listed in the literature as health effects with it as well. Bronchial issues. So anything like that where we're breathing it in. So all of those things that you've just listed there are all the health effects that come from it as well.
Okay. All right, cool. So now that we've covered why it's bad for you, we might get into a bit. Well, I mean, I think we've covered it a bit already in answering those questions. But it's like, where are most workers affected? Like, who's at risk here?
Yeah, who's at risk? Yeah. Well, obviously, if you're operating diesel machinery, then you're at risk. But if you are out in the open environment, then most of that is going to dissipate. And we've talked about, that there's great improvements in that type of workplace anyway. So really, it's in places that are more confined, maybe diesel workshops or repair workshops, repair facilities, tunnelling projects. So we've got lots of tunnelling projects happening currently.
There's a lot of them currently in Melbourne, down here in Victoria. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that is absolutely somewhere that you'd need to, I guess, be aware that there's potentially fairly high exposure to it. Railways, bulk handling, storage areas, anywhere you've got a diesel forklift running around, where there's trucks operating, ships, construction. So there's lots of areas where people have got the potential to be exposed. Yeah.
And I think, I mean, just going back to what I was saying before, like, if you feel like you're at risk, like anybody who's watching right now, like they'd be thinking about their workplace, and they could probably point to, if they are at risk, they'll know exactly why. It's not like it's a secret thing. It's they'll be very aware of any diesel exhaust in their workplace, and then they'll be able to.
Yeah, you see it and you smell it, so it's
getting to each of those
senses, really.
And if you feel like you're at risk. You probably are, and that's when you should start a conversation with your employer about what we're going to do about it, and which follows on to how can we get some testing done, which I think is a particular area of your interest. Is that right, Jen?
Yeah, it is. If you just pop back to that slide before.
This one.
So what that person there has on is a couple of different monitors. Okay. So the dark one, the sort of
on this side.
Yeah. Are you pointing to it? I can't see if you're pointing.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, just on the lapel of the jacket there.
Yeah, on the lapel of the jacket, the black one. So that's called a diesel cyclone, and what he actually has on him is a pump on his belt, and the pump, is about the size of a drink popper, a little bit bigger than that, maybe twice the size of that. So that sits on their belt and draws air through at a certain rate. That air then collects onto that black cyclone. Within there's a filter, and it collects onto the filter, and then you send that away for analysis. Mm-hmm. And when you're looking at diesel particulate, you're actually having it analysed not for diesel particulate itself, but for what's referred to as elemental carbon, which is the accepted surrogate for diesel particulate matter. So we actually have it analysed for elemental carbon, and then that tells us how much is actually in that workplace and how much they're being exposed to. So you can see it's right up on his collar. Yeah. So you need to take the sample in their breathing zone, and that gives us an indication of what it is they would actually be breathing in. On the other side, there's also another little sampler.
This little green tag thing.
The little green one. They actually should be a yellow one, but that one's a green one for different reasons. But if you're looking at them, there's little yellow ones, and the colour sort of matters at the time because it depends what it is you're sampling. But you can also sample for some of the gases, and that's just what's referred to as a passive badge. So it's not a pumped one where it's drawing air onto it, but it's still collecting the gas onto it, and we also send it away for analysis and can determine how much nitrogen dioxide that worker's being exposed to. There are some other real-time ones, little gas meters that can tell us immediately what's going on, but they're two of the methods that we use.
Okay, because it was... I keep going back to silica with this stuff because it's all airborne particles, and something that came up commonly in that was that you can get these monitors that just sort of sit somewhere on the workplace, but they're really no good unless they're on the workers, right? Because if the cloud's over there, it's not fine, but it's you've really got to measure what's going on around here, right?
You're absolutely right. So there's two different types of monitoring. So it's personal monitoring when it's in the breathing space of a worker.
Mm-hmm.
When it's somewhere else, or even if it's beside the worker and not on them, it's referred to as static monitoring. And there's a time and a place for static monitoring. You can get some good information from it. But what you need to remember is that monitor, wherever it's sitting, it doesn't get up from that place and go and have lunch in a potentially clean lunchroom, or it doesn't go over to another dirtier process that's going on. So static monitoring is okay, but you'd definitely be better doing the personal monitoring if you are wanting to know what people are actually breathing in. Yeah,
absolutely. So yeah, that's the testing done. You have, when you're working on site, you have every right to request your employer get testing equipment in, and get an occupational hygienist to come in and do some testing. You'll be well within your rights if you're concerned about diesel fumes to get that testing done, and make sure that it's at a safe level. Is there a safe level? Because that was the thing that came up last time. Is there a safe level of exposure, or is there not? Is it just a little bit is too much?
That's
probably
pretty much a fantastic question. We don't have an Australian exposure standard, as you said earlier, for diesel particulate matter as elemental carbon. The Australian Institute of Occupational Hygienists has put out a publication where they put forward 0.1 milligrams per metre cubed as being a level to keep below. Mm-hmm. A lot of places have taken that on. A lot of industries have taken that number. A lot will use a safety factor or an action level. So when they're half of that, they actually want to be looking at reducing it further within their workplace. Now, with all chemicals, you should be keeping it as low as reasonably practical. And, we, by legislation, we are not supposed to be exposing workers to carcinogen.
No, of course.
And this is a carcinogen. So, yes, you should keep it as low as reasonably practicable. But there is the number of 0.1 milligrams per metre cubed to give you some guidance, because we do need guidance. It's hard to just say, no, just get it lower, keep getting it lower. But the 0.1 milligrams per metre cubed came in for health effects, but also because it is achievable.
Yeah.
So people definitely shouldn't be above that and should be looking at going below that. For the gases, there are different exposure standards as well. So that's just for the diesel particulate matter. Okay.
That's good. You mentioned the phrase, whenever we hear the phrase, if reasonably practicable, we then move on to what controls can be used. And then we always come to our old mate, the hierarchy of controls, which is, it's a common thing. It's not just to be used in this particular example. For those who don't know, a hierarchy of controls is a well-established process to, go down the steps and see if this is reasonable practical, you have to do that, and then, further down. So you'll see there at the top, elimination. That's always our first option. That's the ideal. So in the case of diesel, elimination diesel, you just you substitute it out. Well, no, substitute's the next thing, but you essentially get rid of the diesel engines in the workplace, right?
Yep, correct. And with diesel, there is actually the ability to start at the top of the hierarchy with a lot of contaminants. You often go, yes, I'd like to eliminate that, or it'd be good if I could substitute it, but you can't. But with diesel, for a number of workplaces, you can, because we can get rid of that completely, and we can have a battery-operated machine. We can have an electrically operated machine. Obviously, it depends on the environment, intrinsic safety, all sorts of things like that. but there are options when it comes to these. So forklifts are an ideal one. So you can have a gas forklift instead of a diesel forklift. Again, maybe the gas doesn't have the power that the diesel one does, and you're going to need to move further down your hierarchy of controls. But there's at least those options to be able to consider with diesel.
Yeah, and I did see as well they have battery-powered forklifts now as well.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Yeah, so like those rechargeable batteries, like electric vehicles. So yeah, technology's coming along. So then we move down to substitution. What might that entail?
I guess again, are we just substituting it out with a battery or an electric, or can we actually substitute it for a cleaner burning engine? So maybe still a diesel, but with a better engine in it that's burning cleaner, so a better tiered engine than what you've currently got on site.
Yeah. Okay. And then we move on down to engineering controls. So these would be things like those extractor fans. Is that right? The extractor exhausts.
Yep. So there's
actually, I think you sent me a photo. Yes. Here we go.
Yeah,
so these are
That's a couple of varieties. So they're filters that are actually we can see one there's on the forklift. So these have got the ability to actually, to be used in a warehouse type situation where you need to have a diesel forklift. They've actually got the ability to turn on and off as well as they go through doorways. So if they're going to the outside environment and then coming back in, you don't need them necessarily to be filtering in the outside environment. It's really just when they're inside the workshop. So there's some of those that are fairly tricky. The one there on the truck is more when it's, being serviced. So in a repair workshop, you've often got to run your machine up to see how well it's operating and if maintenance that you've done is effective. So you can actually put something like that on it. Again, you can drive in and out of your workshop, and that can stay on there. It's not to be then driven out onto the road, but it's just for around workshops. So there's those. There's also ones that you've got an exhaust system sort of up into the roof that comes down and puts onto the end of the exhaust as well and takes it away. So there's a few options there which are great.
Yeah, and I would imagine you could probably even take it one step further back and sort of take it into design of workshops and things like that. So
absolutely.
I mean, obviously it's not like practicable all the time. You can't just knock your workshop down and build it up again. But in the design of new workspaces, where they have the vehicles driving in, those spaces could be designed with a view to reducing exposure to diesel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's actually an example over in Canada of an underground coal mine that's not using any diesel. An underground mine over there, not using any diesel whatsoever, but they have designed the mine to be able to use the gravity of that of the workplace, so that the vehicles that they are using underground have actually got enough grunt to be able to do it when they're battery operated. So if you can design something right from dot, then absolutely should be able to design a whole lot of the effects of the diesel out. But as you say, we don't often get that as an opportunity. No,
it's something you can do right at the beginning, but not always once a workplace is up and running. But then yes, you would move on to once we've done with engineering controls, admin controls. So those would be things that I thought would be, simple things, just like turning off the vehicle when it's not necessary to be running, right? Because, as you say, there are times when they are necessary to be running. But, if the truck's just idling there in the garage and it doesn't need to be, that can be a workplace policy to, just have that switched off.
Yep, turn it off. Don't drive in convoy. Limit the number of vehicles that are turned on in an area.
Yep.
Certainly with your admin, you need to be looking at your education as well, because people are fairly well aware that diesel's no good for them. But if they've got a little bit more information, then they will, push that vehicles are turned off, say, or that, when they park somewhere, they're not parking so the exhaust is headed inside a building, it's headed further away. So education's a really important one as well. Clean fuels, making sure cabin doors are shut. So often people have got the ability to close cabin doors, but they leave them open. It might be the fresh air. Maybe the air conditioning isn't working as well as it should be in there because filters haven't been cleaned out or something like that. It's easier for them to communicate. If we can close those, then they're going to be less exposed. So if they're educated in it to know why, then they may also then be able to tell you why they're not using those controls the way they should be used.
Okay, cool. And then, we finally moved down to our bottom step, which is only to be used as a last resort, not just in this case, but always PPE is the lowest rung on the hierarchy of controls because it's the least effective. And so those would be just, the masks that you see very commonly, and they're not always effective. Essentially because they're, you don't wear them from the second that you step onto the job site until you leave. So unless you're wearing it for 8 hours a day, then it's not going to be 100% effective, right?
Yeah, and the contaminant is still there. So if it's still there and you haven't reduced it down at all, then it's got a whole lot more to do. You do need to make sure that you're using a P2 respirator at least for these, because obviously diesel exhaust is a thermally generated particle. So P1 respirators aren't suitable for it. It needs to be a P2. And you can also consider having a charcoal film on them potentially, because that'll then take away some of the organics as well out of the exhaust. So definitely talk to your supplier about what they're recommending for diesel exhaust in the workplace. But yeah, ensuring you've got the right one and ensuring people know how to wear them, maintain them, are clean shaven, so you're going to need something else. It's not going to be any good for you at all. You stay out of the diesel environment.
I'll do my best. Me and Sam are going to be hanging out in the car park later, but I'll put my mask on. Yeah, cool. So I think that takes us sort of to the end of what we were planning on covering. We do have a couple of questions left to be answered. So Les has said, hasn't the so-called improved diesel fuel burning actually resulted in smaller particulates, which are actually more dangerous? Is that
yeah, correct? So there's still a lot of work going on around that. But yeah, so what's happened is our larger particles have been taken away. They used to absorb a whole lot of these smaller particles onto it as well. And now that they're not there, then a lot of these particles are going through and yes, can go straight through, right down deep into our lungs and then into our bloodstream as well. As I said, there's still lots of research going on about that. I don't think we put the big particles back in now to collect them. We've just got to get smarter in collecting those smaller particles. And even the Swiss that are very, very good with their filtration, they are still struggling with it as well. So it's definitely a worldwide issue. But yeah, we're still working on it, I guess.
Okay, a work in progress. And one last question from Greg. How is the exhaust fume measured with the exhaust fan operating?
Don't get it.
I think what he means is, like, if the exhaust fan is operating, can you get accurate testing done?
The exhaust fan in the workplace to remove the
particulate
and the gas. Well, if it's working properly and is always working properly, then you're still going to be sampling what people are breathing in. So it's still accurate. So when you do go out and you do your sampling as an occupational hygienist, you're looking to be monitoring in the workplace in the way that the workplace is operated. So you don't want a fan turned on that day that's not normally on. So that's why you need to really become familiar, I guess, with the workplace, with supervisors as well as with the workers, so you know that you're getting a true representation of the workplace.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I guess what you're saying is you would want the exhaust fan on while you're doing the testing.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's normally on, then you would want it on.
Okay, great. That's all the questions I've got here. Sam, have we had any more questions?
That's all the questions we've had.
No, no one else wants to talk to us?
Paul's jumping in. Can Jen email through the case study from Canada? I would love to take that to WorkSafe Design Working Group.
Okay. So can we get access to that case from Canada? Would you be able to send that through us?
I'll get you a reference for that, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. And we'll make that available for everybody to read. We'll get that up on our Facebook page. That'd be great.
Paul also said earlier, maybe we could issue a VTHC diesel particulate matter safety standard like the silica one.
Like the silica one.
People would be interested in that.
Yeah, for sure. We could adopt that standard that a bunch of industries have been using and really push that like we did with the silica. I think that'd be a good idea if people are keen. So feel free to let us know what your feelings are out there in Facebook.
So if you wanted to go and, I guess, see the background behind all of that, if you go onto the Australian Institute of Occupational Hygienists webpage,
okay,
that the documentation of how they've come up with that number is all on there.
Okay, great. Yeah, because we're really big on the science here. That was one of the drivers between, on what we did with silica, because, that science was very much behind where it was when the standard was written. So, yes, we're very interested in that science. We'll definitely have a look at that.
Yeah, do. Because a lot of, with that, they've got the experts within Australia and anybody within the AOH has got the ability to comment on that particular paper before it's published. So, it goes through a lot of to and fro to make sure that we've got the most up-to-date and most relevant information in there.
Great. Okay. Well, yeah, that's a process that we will hopefully engage with. All right. Well, if that's not, or if that's everything from all of our beloved listeners, then I think we'll call the end of that. Thank you very much, Jen, for coming in. Well, not coming in, for dialing in. It's been great. We would love to have you again, in future. And this is, if we're going to continue to be working in this space, then we'd love to continue working with you.
Yeah, well, anything in the hygiene field, occupational hygiene field, let me know. And certainly I'm happy to, to answer any other questions if people have got anything offline as well.
Yep. Great. And we'll talk to you about how we can, if people are keen to, get in touch, we'll talk to you about how to make that happen, if that's okay with you.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Fantastic. Well, you can sign out if you want. I'll be in touch probably tomorrow, and then we'll debrief. But
right.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for coming along.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Thanks, Jen. Bye. Yes. So we're still.
Do you want to end it?
So we're still here.
Just go to the first one if you want to end it.
What?
Do you want to end it?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Well, actually, no. We kind of do want to end it. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. This has been very informative, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed. We're really excited about continuing to do these webinar series. We did this one today because of a comment someone made on our last webinar saying that they were interested in hearing about diesel fumes. So we're obviously open to suggestions if somebody has anything. So I guess we'll call it. Thanks, Sam, for keeping an eye on things over there.
Pleasure.
How you doing?
I'm doing better than ever, man.
Anything you want to add?
Went without a hitch. No, just let me know when you want to end it.
Good. Anything else you want to talk about? Did you buy those pants that you were looking at?
No. Didn't buy those pants. Don't have the money yet.
Sam and I are interested in updating our spring wardrobes, and we're both very anti shorts. We're some pale dudes. So yes, thank you everybody for joining in. We'll see you next time on the network. Just turn it off for me.
Thanks, team. Oh, God. Here we go. Mwah.